Hello, this is Jacqueline from Jack Knits, and today we're going to continue talking about double knitting, but now we are going to talk about how we can do double knitting ribbing, a 1x1 ribbing that you can do for a brim of a hat, for a beautiful double knitted project where you've got one color ribbing on one side and a different color ribbing on the reverse side. It makes for a great double knitted project, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do this. Let's get started. All right, let's get started on doing double knitting ribbing. So when you make a double knitting hat, you can also do the ribbing double-sided as well. So you have the one color on one side of a 1x1 ribbing and the opposite color on the other side. It makes for a really great start to a hat. When you're doing a double knitting hat, you can incorporate the double knitting in the ribbing as well as the stockinette stitch. So let's start by casting on for our double knitting. Now I'm not going to do a real thorough explanation of how to do cast on. I'm assuming that since you've maybe done some double knitting in the past, that you're familiar with the different methods of double knitting cast on. If you're not, I have two other videos on double knitting. One that's double knitting in the round, like this hat here, and another is for double knitting flat. Both have a very clear, specific instructions on how to do this particular cast on, which shows the kind of the opposite color peeking through on the cast on edge. That is one method to do, which I'm going to do for this as well. There are several other methods for casting on for double knitting. You could go ahead and research those. One is an invisible cast on, which does not show that other color on the front side. So feel free to investigate any number of those cast on methods, or view my previous videos on how to do this cast on. I'll have a link in the description below as well. So I'm just going to do a quick overview if you need on this, and we're going to start the cast on by doing a simple slip knot here. Then we're going to be doing a cast on where we are doing a knit cast on and then a purl cast on. So we're going to just start by doing a regular knit cast on, which is very similar to the long tail cast on, and then a purl cast on where we're purling with the other color. So a knit cast on, then a purl cast on, knit and purl. And again, full instructions on doing this are on those other two videos, so please watch those for a more thorough explanation. And when you're casting on for double knitting, you of course want to cast on a pair of stitches for every stitch you need to cast on. So I'm casting on a knit and a purl. My knit stitches are my white and my purl stitches are my purple here, and I'm going to do that for the number of stitches that I'm going to need. So if I'm needed to cast on, let's say 60 stitches, I would need to cast on 60 sets or pairs of stitches. So let me go ahead and finish this cast on in the round, so I have an appropriate number to do my demonstration, and then I'm going to go ahead and knit in my double knitting ribbing for a few rounds, because it's going to be a little bit easier for you to see what I'm doing and follow the explanation of this double knitting if there are a few rounds kind of already established in that pattern. So let me work ahead a little bit, and then we'll jump in and learn how to do this double ribbing together. Okay, so you can see that I've completed the casting on for our double knitting rib stitch, and I've completed a few rows, so you can kind of see the pattern that's developing here, where I've got a 1x1 ribbing on the front with the white yarn, and with the purple it's a 1x1 ribbing in the back, a really nice double knitting ribbing. So let's talk about how to complete this and work through the practice of these stitches. Now, the first thing to remember about double knitting ribbing is that we are doing a 1x1 ribbing on the front and also on the back. So the sequence of stitches will need to be a knitting the front color stitch, and then knitting the back color stitch, and then purling the front color stitch, and then purling the back color stitch. So knit the front, knit the back, purl the front, purl the back, knit the front, knit the back, purl the front, purl the back. So that is the sequence of stitching that we're going to be doing. Now, the second thing to remember about double knitting ribbing is, if you may recall, if you do regular double knitting with stockinette stitching, you may recall that when you do the front knitting side of the fabric, both of your working yarns and colors need to be in the back of your work. And then when you do the purl stitch for the back side, both of your yarns need to be in the front of your work. And in my videos, I talk about that as being, these yarns are buddies and they really do not want to be separated. You always want to keep them together, which is a great way to remember it. But not the case with a ribbing. In the ribbing, these two yarns, let's say, have had a little bit of a falling out. They are no longer buddies and they want to be kept separated unless it's absolutely necessary to be together. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So because these yarns need to be kind of separated, they will have a home position. The white yarn, or the front yarn, working yarn, is going to be need to be staying in the front. That is the home position for the front yarn. And then the back color yarn, its home position is in the back. So because they're in opposite ends of my side of my knitting, I prefer to put my working yarn in both hands. When I do double knitting stockinette stitch, I prefer to keep both or hold both yarns in my left hand and work it that way. But it's a little bit easier, since they are kind of on opposite ends, to have one in each hand. So that's how I'm going to show you how to do this knitting. So the home position, white yarn, front yarn in front, and the back yarn in back, is where you're going to want to put your yarn after each stitch. It's like it always has to go back home. And then you're going to do your stitch and then always bring it back to its home position. So let's talk about how that's going to work. So our very first stitch here is going to be a knit stitch, and it's going to be done with the front color, or the white yarn. And my white yarn in its home position is in the front of my needles. But that is not the position it needs to be in to do a knit stitch. So I'm going to temporarily bring that working yarn to the back in order to knit that stitch. So I will knit that stitch and then immediately bring it back to its home position, which is in the front. Okay, always bring it back to the home position. Now the next stitch is a purple stitch, and I also need to knit that stitch in my ribbing. My purple yarn is conveniently located in the back of my work, and that is where it needs to be to do that knit stitch. So I can just now simply knit my knit stitch and keep the yarns now in its home position. All right, the next stitch is going to be a purl stitch with my white color. And to do a purl stitch, my yarn needs to be in the front, which is exactly where it is for this white yarn. So I can now just purl that white stitch, simple, and keep them in the home position. Now my next stitch is a purple stitch, and it needs to be purled. My purl yarn is currently in the back, but to do a purl stitch, I need to bring that purl yarn to the front. So wrap it around your needle if it's in your right hand, so it's in the front, in order to successfully purl that stitch. Once you're done purling that stitch, bring the working yarn back to its home position, which is in the back. Okay, and that is the sequence that we're going to do. We're going to do it a few more times to really get the hang of it, but that's what you want to think about, is home position, move the yarns to where you need it to do that stitch, but always bring it back to the home position. Let's do it a few more times. Next stitch, it's a knit stitch, my front stitch. I need to move that yarn to the back in order to knit it, bring it back to its home position. Now I can knit my purple stitch with the yarn in back, keep it in the home position. Now I'm going to purl the next stitch, which is the white stitch. My yarn is in front where it needs to be. Purl that stitch. Now I'm going to be purling the purple stitch, which now I need to bring that purple yarn to the front, purl it, and then bring it back to the back. Let's do it again. Knit the first stitch, bring the working yarn to the back to knit, knit the purple and bring it back to the home position. Now knit the purple one. Now purl the white one And now we got to purl the purple, so we have to bring it to the front to purl it, and bring it to the back after you're done purling. Now when you do that, it's the natural tendency is to also kind of bring this white yarn to the back. It's just kind of naturally falls to the back, and that's okay, because once you bring this purple yarn back to the back, now this white yarn is in the position it needs to be to do the next stitch, which is the knit stitch. So it just kind of naturally falls to the back after you do that purl of the back yarn. So just let it do that, because now that kind of saves you a little time to now knit that front stitch, bring it to the front, knit the back stitch, leave the yarns where they are, purl the front stitch. Now bring it purple yarn to the front to purl that stitch and bring it to the back, and you can let that white yarn fall to the back as well as you bring that purple yarn back to the back. All right, does that make sense? I hope so. It's just really something just kind of keep in your head, and after a while you're going to get the flow of how you move the stitches, the yarn for each stitch, and it's going to become really second nature. So you're just going to kind of continue in that fashion after you're done working your ribbing. And if you wanted to, continue with a hat and then move to stockinette stitch, then of course you would just doing the regular double knitting, which is knitting the front stitch and purling the back stitch. And then you are going to be keeping your yarns together when you switch to doing stockinette stitches. Okay, well, I hope you found this video helpful and you give some double knitting ribbing a try. It's a really great way to make a beautiful double knitted hat. And you can add fun designs to your hat too, and that will be a topic for a future video. So if you like, please don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe so you can have easy access to my video stash and also get notification on future videos all about knitting tips and techniques, creative stitches, and fun patterns. Thanks for watching, everyone. Happy knitting.